2.Borobudur True Back History Book. Part 2. Santo Saba Works. Created as a discourse to scientists based on academic studies and studies, it is not defaming ethnic races and religions, but in an effort to restore the true history of Indonesia. INDONÄSIARYÄ. By Santo Saba. Exploration and Research. Complete info. WhatsApp to +62813 2132 9787. Indian philosophy. Views of early philosophy in India. There is a lot of diversity that can be seen from the Indian philosophical tradition. Significantly, some philosophies do not agree with each other. Indian philosophy predominantly refers to the orthodox understanding of Hinduism and on 6 points which are considered to have originated from Hindu philosophy. The differences range from the belief that every individual has a soul, self, Atman, and in other philosophies asserting that there is no soul, from axiologies in a frugal ascetic life to a hedonistic one, from a belief in rebirth to asserting that there is no rebirth. Indian philosophy predominates on concepts such as dharma, karma, samsara, reincarnation, dukkha, renunciation, meditation, with almost all of them focused on the ultimate goal of individual liberation through various spiritual practices, moksha, nirvana. They differ in their assumptions about the nature of existence as well as the specifics of the path to final liberation, so that many philosophies are in contradiction with one another. Due to their ancient doctrine, there are many philosophical diversity found in other ancient cultures of India. The main understanding of Indian philosophy was formalized mainly between 1000 BC to the early centuries of the Common Era. According to the philosopher Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan, the period of classification to the Upanishadic compositions in the later Vedic period, 1000 to 500 BC, constitutes the earliest philosophical composition in the world. Competition and integration between the various philosophies was intense during their formative years, particularly between 800 BC and 200 AD. Some philosophies such as Jainism, Buddhism, Yoga, Saiva and Advaita Vedanta are still influential, but others, such as Charvaka and Ajivaka, do not. Ancient Indian philosophy and medieval Indian philosophical era texts include extensive discussion on ontology, metaphysics. Brahman, Atman, Sunyata, Anatta is a reliable term in the discourse of science, epistemology, pramanas, value systems, axiology, and other topics. There are several understandings of philosophy in India, namely, heterodox understanding Srama-philic philosophy, Jain philosophy, Buddhist philosophy, Ajivaka philosophy, Karwaka philosophy, Ajnana philosophy. In this case we will describe two philosophies, namely Buddhist philosophy, and Hindu philosophy. Hindu philosophy and teachings. Many intellectuals classified the Hindu tradition during the medieval Brahmin Sanskrit scholastic period into a standard list of 6 orthodox philosophies, Astika, Darshanas, 6 philosophies, Sad Darsana, all of which received testimony from the Veda Samkhya. Philosophy of rationalism with dualism and atheist themes. The general theme of the orthodox philosophy of yoga, a philosophy similar to Samkhya but accepting only a theme-defined theistic Nyaya. Realism emphasizes analysis and logic of Vaisesika, naturalism with atomistic themes and is related to the philosophy of Nyaya Purva Mimamsa, or just Mimamsa. Ritualistic philosophy with Vedic interpretation and philological emphasis, and Vedanta, also called Uttara Mimamsa, in the Upanishadic tradition, with many sub-philosophical understandings ranging from dualism to non-dualism. The roots of Hinduism. Since research on Indology and Hindu studies has grown, the history and roots of Hinduism have been debated by scholars in the Western world. Previously, there was no term, Hinduism, or Hinduism, but the existence of the Hindu tradition as it is now has its roots since ancient times. In addition, scholars find it difficult to define Hinduism because of the absence of a founding figure of the religion. Scholars see Hinduism as a combination of the characteristics of the various cultures or traditions that exist in India. One of its roots is Brahmanism or ancient Vedic religion, which is the result of the fusion of the Indo-Aryan people with Harappa culture and civilization. In the discussion below, we will find out that the Aryan nation or the Saka were the ancestors of the previous Indonesian archipelago, which carries original Dharmic teachings. This is what Western historians call the teachings of Brahmanism, or Indonesian historians call and write it as Shiva religion. The Shiva religion in question is not Hindu India or Buddhism. This is the teachings of the ancestors of the Indonesian archipelago, which have until now been perfectly preserved in Bali. In India. In addition, traditions that support the development of Hinduism include the Sramanic or rejection tradition, from North India, as well as Mesolithic and Neolithic cultures in India, such as the Indus River Valley civilization religions, Dravidian traditions, as well as local tribal traditions and religions. Nation in India. After the Vedic period, between 500 to 200 BC and AD 300, at the beginning of the epic and Purana, or preclassical period, Hindu synthesis began to emerge. The time when the influence of Sramana and Buddhism was included, accompanied by the emergence of the devotional tradition into Brahmanism through the Smriti scriptures. This synthesis emerged under the pressure of the development of Buddhism and Jainism. During the reign of the Gupta dynasty, the Puranas were compiled, used to spread a common religious ideology amidst the acculturation that tribal and illiterate societies lived. The result is the emergence of Hinduism Puranic Hinduism, which has a striking difference when compared to the previous Brahmanism, which adheres to Dharmasastra and Smriti. Over several centuries, Hinduism and Buddhism grew side by side until they finally gained prominence in the 8th century AD. From North India, the Hindu synthesis and the concept of division of society spread to South India and parts of Southeast Asia. This was supported by a number of activities, providing settlements for the Brahmins in the area, which the local authorities allowed the inclusion or assimilation of popular non-Vedic, not mentioned in the Vedic, deities, and the Sanskritization process, the condition in which people from different strata of Indian society tend to adapt their religious and social life to Brahmanic norms. The assimilation process explains that cultural diversity. Hinduism can be described as a traditional vessel that has a complex, growing, hierarchical, and sometimes internally inconsistent character. Hinduism does not recognize a single belief system designed to homogenize belief or faith, but has become a common term covering a plurality of religious traditions in India, according to India's Supreme Court. Buddhist philosophy. Buddhist philosophy is a system of thought that begins with the teachings of Siddhartha Gautama, the Buddha, or the Awakened. Buddhism is founded on the basic philosophy of the Sramanic philosophy, which was influenced by the first half of the 1 BC millennium BC, but its foundations for these new ideas were not discovered or accepted by other schools of Sramana. Paul Williams stated that Buddhism and Hinduism influence each other and share many concepts, but now it is difficult to identify and describe these influences. Influence of the 3rd century AD Buddhist Tathagatagarbha Sutra of Advaita Vedanta, Hinduism based in the research of the scholar Gaudapada, the main point of view is clearly thought in Hinduism. Buddhism rejects the Vedic concepts of Brahman, reality, and Atman, soul, independence, on the basis of Hindu philosophy. The basic philosophy of Buddhism is heavily influenced by the philosophical views of other Indian systems, such as the belief in karma, causality, samsara, the idea of the afterlife and cycles of rebirth, dharma, ideas of ethics, duties and values, the impermanence of all material things and the body, and the possibility of spiritual liberation, nirvana or moksha. The main philosophy that underlies Hindu and Jain philosophy. In this case for Buddhist philosophy is the rejection of the view of the immortal soul, Atman, in favor of anatta, non-self. The two main extant schools of Buddhism that are generally accepted by scholars are Theravada, school of elders, and Mahayana, great vehicle. Vajrayana, a form of teaching associated with Indian Siddha, can be considered a third school or only part of Mahayana. Theravada has a wide following in Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia. Mahayana, which includes tradition, Zen, Nichiren, Shingon, and Tiantai, can be found all over East Asia. Tibetan Buddhism, preserving Vajrayana teachings from 8th century India, is practiced in the regions around the Himalayas, Mongolia and Kalmykia. In Theravada Buddhism, the ultimate goal is the attainment of the supreme bliss of Nibbana, which is attained by practicing the Noble Eightfold Path, also known as the Middle Way, thereby breaking away from what is known as the cycle of suffering and rebirth. Mahayana Buddhism, on the other hand, aspires to attain Buddhahood through the Bodhisattva path, a state in which one remains in a cycle to help other beings attain enlightenment. Every Buddhist tradition holds to the Tripitaka as the main reference because it records the sayings and teachings of Gautama Buddha. His followers then recorded and classified his teachings into 3 books, namely the Sutta Pitaka, Discourses of the Buddha, Vinaya Pitaka, Rules or Regulations of the Monks, and the Abhidhamma Pitaka, Legal Teachings of Metaphysics and Psychology. All Theravada texts use Pali, which is the language spoken in parts of India, especially the north, at the time of the Buddha. It is interesting to note that there is no philosophy or other writing in the Pali language other than the Theravada Buddhist scriptures, which are called the Tipitaka scriptures. Therefore, the term Pali Buddhist teachings is synonymous with Theravada Buddhism. Theravada Buddhism and some other sources argue that the Buddha taught all his Zen teachings in Pali, in India, Nepal and beyond during the last 45 years of his life, before he attained parinibbana. All Mahayana scriptures were originally in Sanskrit and are known as the Tripitaka. Therefore the term Sanskrit Buddhism is synonymous with Mahayana Buddhism. Sanskrit is the classical language and the oldest language spoken by the educated people of India. Apart from Mahayana Buddhist scriptures, we find many historical and religious records, or other local traditional philosophical texts written in Sanskrit. Between Hindu and Buddha, Hinduism and Buddhism share common origins in the Ganges of northern Indian culture during the so-called second urbanization, around 500 BC. They have influenced each other's parallel beliefs in existing philosophies that have existed side by side, but differences can also be found between the two. Buddhism once reached its golden age in the Indian subcontinent due to the support of royal rule, but began to decline after the Gupta era, and almost disappeared from India in the 11th century, except in some pockets of India. It continues to exist outside India and major religions in several Asian countries. The term Buddha has appeared in Hindu scriptures prior to the birth of Buddha Gautama. In the Vayu Purana, sage Daksha calls Lord Shiva as Buddha. Similarities and differences. Karma, Sanskrit. From the root kr, to do, is a word which means action or activity and often implies its subsequent results, also called karma phala, fruit of action. It is generally understood as a term to denote the entire cycle of cause and effect as described in the philosophies of a number of cosmologies, including the similarities of Buddhism and Hinduism. Karma is a central part of Buddhism. In Buddhism, karma is the direct voluntary result of one's words, thoughts and/or actions in life. In pre-Buddhist Vedic culture, karma had to do with whether or not the correct ritual action was performed. Little emphasis was placed on moral behavior in the early Vedic conceptions. In Buddhism, on the other hand, the word a person, thoughts and/or actions form the basis for good and bad karma. Sila moral goes hand in hand with the development of meditation and wisdom. Buddhism carries a different meaning from pre-Buddhist conception of karma. Dharma, Sanskrit, Devanagari or Pali Dhamma, Devanagari, means law of nature, reality and significance with regard to spirituality and religion may be considered the way of higher truth. In the Hindu designation Sanatana Dharma, which translates as eternal Dharma. Likewise, Buddha Dharma is a term for Buddhism. The general concept of Dharma forms the basis for philosophy, beliefs and practices that originate in India. The 4 main philosophies are Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, Jaina Dharma, and Sikhism, Sikha Dharma, all of which maintain the centrality of Dharma in their teachings. Similarity in symbol. Mudras. This is a symbolic hand gesture expressing emotions. Buddha images are almost always depicted doing mudras. Dharma Chakra. The Dharma Chakra, which appears on the Indian national flag and the flag of the Thai royal family, is a Buddhist symbol used by members of both religions. Rudraksha. These are the beads that devotees, usually monks, use for prayer. Tilak. Many Hindus mark their head with a tilak, which is interpreted as the third eye. The same sign is one of the characteristic physical characteristics of the Buddha. Swastika and Swastika. Both consider as sacred symbols. It can be clockwise or counterclockwise and is both seen in Hinduism and Buddhism. The Buddha is sometimes depicted with a swastika on his chest or palms. Yoga practice is closely connected to the beliefs and practices of both Hindu and Buddhist religions. However, there are different variations in the use of yoga terminology in the two religions. In Hinduism, the term yoga generally refers to the 8 branches of yoga as defined in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, written sometime after 100 BC, with the idea that an individual Atman, or soul, will bind with the monistic entity that underlies all things Brahman. Yoga in Hinduism is also known to be very complex. Based on integration, yoga defines a certain process, has an emphasis on knowledge and practice, which is known to be mature and difficult. In Tibetan Buddhist Vajrayana, however, the term yoga is only used to refer to every kind of spiritual practice, of various types of Tantra, such as Kriya Yoga or Charya Yoga, for yoga gods, and yoga teachers. In the early stages of translating the Sutrayana and Tantrayana from India, China and other regions to Tibet, along with the lineage of sadhana practice, codified in the Nyingmapa canon, Sanskrit, Yana is Adi Yoga, Sanskrit. Meditation. There are various general terms and general descriptions of meditative practice which are seen as the basis of the practice of yoga meditation in both Hinduism and Buddhism. Many scholars have noted that the concepts of dhyana and samadhi, technical terms describing the absorption stage of meditation, are common to meditation practice in both Hindu and Buddhist religions. Most important in this context is the similarity between Buddhist dhyana, Pali, jhana, and samadhi, samprajnata of classical yoga. Also, many Tibetan Vajrayana practices with chakras, the inner channel of energy, nadi, and kundalini, are called tumo in Tibet. Caste. The Buddha rejected caste differences in Brahmanical religion, with the ordination of all regardless of caste. Nirvana. The word nirvana, Pali, nibbana, was first used in a technical sense in Buddhism, and cannot be found in any of the pre-Buddhist Upanishads. This can be found in any Jain text. There is a literacy text of the word svarga in 2.Borobudur, not nirvana. Is a lie. There is a scene of porn in the bas-reliefs of 2.Borobudur. This is a conspiracy to close the public's eyes from the true facts about who the ancestors of the archipelago were. There are 12 words, svarga, in the bas-reliefs of 2.Borobudur, not written words. Nirvana, or jhana, and the literacy of the word heaven is the familiar pronunciation of the archipelago, which proves that the language and teachings that underlie it are native to us, the Indonesian archipelago. The literacy of the text of the word svarga, or heaven, this is not from Arabic or Indian. Pay attention to. There are 160 basic relief panels published with the name Karmawibanga, using the interpretation of the manuscript Mahakarmawibanga, but not fully following the text. Burnett Kemper's 1970, 151 and 1976. The basic reliefs that were photographed by K. Cheppas in 1890 were closed in 1891, with the consideration that they would collapse, but no crack appeared. The literacy of the words written on the figure of the panel are filled circle Vairapa, filled circle Mahachakya, filled circle Vyasada, Abhidya, Mityadarsti, filled circle Kusala, filled circle Suvarnavarna, Katyavandana, filled circle Mahojaska Samadana, Sasvara, filled circle Svarga, Ba, illegible, filled circle Svarga, Ba, illegible, filled circle Mayas, Sa, Kyamadana, filled circle Kakravarti, filled circle Svarga, filled circle Mahe, Sa, Kyasamavadana, Ganta, filled circle Kakravarti, filled circle Sabdasravana, filled circle Svarga, Bogi, filled circle Prasadita, Vastradana, filled circle Svarga, filled circle Kusaladharmabhajana, filled circle Bogi, filled circle Svarga, filled circle Pataka, filled circle Adyabogi, filled circle Svarga, filled circle Tana, illegible, filled circle Svarga, filled circle Chatradana, Mahana, filled circle Svarga, filled circle Svarga, Puspadana, filled circle Svarga, filled circle Maladana, Bogi, Svarga, filled circle Anjali. The word Svarga is the original word of the archipelago because it does not have a declination in the form of a locative case, namely, Svarj, or Svarg. The writing of this inscription is not in accordance with the grammar of Sanskrit Panini, and regarding declination if the word is nominative with additional examples in the case H, or Visarga, McDonnell 1954371 and Zoetmulder 1995-1169. Filled circle in the source of the Lontar quote, Geguritan Bhima Svarga. This Svarga Loka is understood to be a holy realm. The heaven of the gods is a temporary stopover for good souls. Svargo, Svarga, Svargaloka, Kadwan, Kyongan. Svargaloka is the third world filled with rays of light and happiness, which is the dwelling place for holy people. In the Lontar, Putru Pasaji, it is mentioned that there is a realm of the gods and goddesses, Svarga Manak. The literary text, Svarga, is the native language of the archipelago, Swargo, or Svarga, Svargaloka, Kadwan, Kyongan, Svarga, which later was absorbed into the word heaven. Filled circle in Islamic eschatology, the hereafter, is used to term life after death. Jannah is the concept of heaven, while the meaning of Jannah in Arabic is garden, is not found in the text. Literacy of the word heaven in the scriptures. Filled circle in the Veda, it is said that Swarga is the third world, which is full of light and light, which is the abode of the gods and is termed Swarga Loka. Bhagavad Gita says, Swarga is a temporary stopover. After enjoying the vast Swarga, they return to the world. Swarga as a place of temporary pleasure, while true happiness is the union of Atman, soul, with Brahman, the creator. The Venerable Siddhartha Gautama describes Buddhism as a raft which, after floating on a river, will allow the occupant to attain Nirvana. Nibbana is the highest bliss. Bliss, Nibbana, cannot be experienced by indulging the senses, but by calming it down. Nibbana is not a place. Nibbana is not an absence or extinction. Nibbana is not a heaven or Svarga. So, the word heaven, which is familiar in the archipelago, is not from India or Arabic. This word is the result of absorption from the teachings and native language of the archipelago, namely Svarga, which colored India. The word Mahachakya means great power, or the people who have great power. Kakya, or Kaka, Saka, this is our ancestor. In the archipelago there are hundreds of inscriptions dating from Kaka, Saka and the beginning of the Saka year, not 78 AD. Our history is lost before that year and is considered primitive before that year. Mahachakya 43 panel frame. The word Mahe means great or great nation, and the word Sakya is the Kaka Nusantara. Maheshakya is one of the words that is absorbed into Sanskrit, which is also used in books such as the Upanishads, the Veda. The Pali, Dharmic original, or Dharma, Sanskrit, Dhamma, is recorded on the bas-reliefs of Borobudur with the word Kusaladharmabhajana, which colors India. Dharma comes from the root word dur, which means to maintain, uphold, maintain, protect, which in the adjective has the affix ic attached to the human being. In contextual language throughout philosophy in India, Dharma implies the notion of religion. Dharma is presented as a central concept used to explain higher truths, or the ultimate reality of the universe. The term Dharma Dhamma is a spiritual and religious term which is considered to underlie the birth of Falsafa in India. This word literally means the duty of the righteous or pious path, in the general sense of that term. The antonym of dharma is adharma, which means unnatural or immoral. The main basic concept of dharmic is in Buddhism, Jainism, Hinduism, as well as Sikhs in mainland India, even Zoroaster. Vwana Kaka Phala is the original name of the Borobudur building. Literacy word Vwana. 3 stages of building form. Vwana Chaka Phala is a description of 3 realms of existence in this universe, not Kama, Rupa, Indian version of Arupa Dhatu. In fact, Trilaksana is also called Bhavanatraya. 1. Bhavana lasting, eternal realm. 2. Bhavana Driyo, outward nature. 3. Bhavana Triya, Alam Rohaniya. Moksartham Jagadita Yasya Iti Dharma. Moksa. His contemplation with the practice of tapa, or topo, restraint to reach the spiritual level. Brata. Disciplined procedures are done to improve the quality of humanity. This is not a statue of Buddha, but he is Siddhartha Gautama following the technique, contemplation, of our ancestors. If it is true that this building is based on the teachings that were born in India, when and who was it before Islam that brought it to the archipelago? Chinese pilgrims come to the archipelago to learn, not to bring teachings from their country and then spread them here. Filled Circle Fa Huan 337-422, Aden 399-414 AD. Filled Circle Sung Yun 518-521 AD. Filled Circle Haiyan Sang 602-664 AD. Wei Ning 664 AD 667 AD. Filled Circle I Sing or Yi Jing 671-695 AD. Filled Circle Atisa Dipamkara Shranyana 1013 AD. He traveled to Svarnadvipa, lived for 12 years to study, then returned to India, died in 1054 in Nitang, Tibet. In Indonesia in the 4th to 7th centuries AD, there were no records of Indian missionaries bringing teachings to the archipelago. It was published when Ashan Jinarakida's Bhikkhu sparked the idea of holding a national, Tri-Suki Waisak, ceremony in Borobudur on May 22, 1953. And from this moment on, published, Borobudur adheres to the teachings of the Mahayana stream. Palembang is also published as the center of the Buddhist past. Also Rshi Markandeya is native to the archipelago, written in the sloka, Bwana Tatwa, about Maharshi Markandeya. The eternal realm is the Suwang, nature which does not have Purva and Wasana. This spiritual contemplation procession appears on statues of people sitting cross-legged. Tapabroto, the spiritual contemplation is Topo. 1. Toponing bodies. 2. Toponing lust. 3. Toponing buddhi. 4. Toponing suksmau. 5. Toponing kahio. 6. Toponing jesing. Samadhi, Suwang, Laku, Yoga are the original spiritual contemplation of the archipelago. Filled Circle Java calls it Tapabroto. Filled Circle Tapabrata, the term for the Parayangan area. Filled Circle Balinese chants Upasana. Filled Circle Kamala in Sulawesi, when doing so is called a Kamala. Filled Circle Tapo, Batagak in Svarnadvipa. Do not close. Facts, to the glory of the old archipelago, is, lies, publication. There is a scene of porn on the bas-reliefs of Dharma Chakra Phala, which is now published as Borobudur. The use of the term in the Bhagavad Gita may be a sign of the strong Buddhist influence on Hindu understanding. Although the word Nirvana is absent in the Upanishads, the word itself predates the Buddha. It must be remembered that Nirvana is one of the many things for salvation that occurs in Orthodox Buddhist scriptures. Another term that appears is Vimoksha, or Vimutti, implying salvation and liberation, respectively. Several more synonymous words are used for nirvana in Buddhist scriptures. Moksha, moksha, which means liberation, and Kevala, kaivalya, which means wholeness. These words are given a new Buddhist meaning. Views on the philosophy between Hinduism and Buddhism in the table. Philosophical view. Early Buddhism. Early Hinduism, non-Sramanic. Let us examine one by one the sentences written in the literature that so far exist. The existing literature data for the translation of the Caloric Inscription are. The inscription mentions the construction of a sacred Buddhist building to house Manjusri, a statue containing the Buddha's wisdom, Dharma, and Sangha, the same trinity as Brahma, Vishnu and Maheshvara. The construction of this sacred building was ordered by King Indra, honored in his official name Sri Sangramadhananjaya. The ascribed reference to Hindu deities in this Buddhist temple denotes Tantrayana, Vajrayana Buddhism. The temple dedicated to Manjusri is identified as Candi Siwu, which is located not far to the north from the Prambanan temple. Today the inscription is displayed at the National Museum of Indonesia, Jakarta, with numbers. Inventory number D.44. Manjusri. We observe the word Manjusri. To understand the meaning of the word, we start with the same word or many identical to the word in general and is popular so far. Later we will trace the philosophy that underlies the word, then we will connect the general basic understanding with words used in ancient inscriptions or sacred buildings in Java, and later we will understand the use of the word Manjusri on the Caloric inscription. The word Manjusri we find in some literature between some Indian philosophies in general on the main teachings of Manjusri, namely yoga, samadhi or tapa. It is necessary to note the three words are very familiar words in the local dialect of the archipelago. Here we must be careful because of philosophy. It exists in both Hinduism and Buddhism. We will try to slowly examine each of the underlying philosophies as well as the years of development of the respective religious philosophies that underlie Hinduism and Buddhism. Yoga is one of the main philosophies in India, which consists of Samkhya, Yoga, Nyaya, Vaisesika Mimamsa Advaita. Literary descriptions of yoga are in Yoga Sutras, Yoga Yajnavalkya, Samkhya, Pravakanabhasya. Concept-derived yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahara, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. Before paying attention to this information, which explains the rituals or processions of tapa that exist in almost every early philosophy in India, we notice that in this case Buddhism is clearly called the word yoga. The concept comes from the samadhi philosophy, while in Hinduism it is in the Pulsapha. Sannyasa. Philosophical view. Ajivaka. Early Buddhism. Karwaka. Jainism. The orthodox philosophy of Hinduism. Nans-Ramanic. In the Buddhist version, in naming the statue or Akka, Manjusri Dynasty Pala, India, 9th century AD. Manjusri is a bodhisattva associated with Prajna in Mahayana Buddhism. In Tibetan Buddhism, he is also a Yidam. In Sanskrit, Manjusri is also known by the full name of Manjusri Kumarabuddha, literally, Manjusri, young man, or, less literally, Prince Manjusri. In Mahayana Buddhism, scholars have identified Manjusri as the oldest and most significant bodhisattva in Mahayana literature. The first Manjusri are mentioned at the beginning of the Mahayana Sutras such as 67. Prajnaparamita Sutra, and through this association very early in tradition it came to symbolize the embodiment of prajna, transcendent wisdom. Vajrayana Buddhism. In Vajrayana Buddhism, Manjusri is a deity in the ritual application of meditation, and is considered a fully enlightened Buddha. In Shingon Buddhism, he is one of the three Buddhas. He is a figure in many esoteric texts such as Manjusri Mula Kalpa and Manjusri Namasamjati. His wife in some traditions is Saraswati. Manjusri Mula Kalpa, who was later classified in the Kriyatantra, states that the mantras taught in Seva, Garuda and Vaisnava Tantra seem to be more effective of the descriptions applied by Buddhists because they were all originally based on views of Manjushri. An example of Manjusri's wisdom teachings can be found in the Saptasatika Prajnaparamita Sutra, Taisho Tripitaka 232. This sutra contains a dialogue between Manjusri and Buddha in Samadhi, Ekavyuha Samadhi. Sheng Yen adopted Manjusri teachings, to enter Samadhi naturally through transcendent wisdom. The conclusion from Manjusri in the explanation above is that the philosophy that underlies the tapa ritual exists in almost every philosophical view in India as well as in Hinduism. The philosophy of Manjusri is identical to the ritual of the tapa procession in Indonesian. The process of spiritual contemplation for the improvement of human quality existed in the past before there was a teaching called religion on the face of the earth. The process is tapabroto, depicted on a stupa on the Sangharama Vwana Kaka Phala site, which is now published, called Borobudur. This is not a statue of a great figure, Mulia Putra Raja, who was born on Indian soil. This statue sitting cross-legged is a procession of contemplation of the ancestors of the Indonesian nation of the Aryan Saka, Sakya Kakya, written on the bas-relief with the literacy of Mahe Kakya words. Filled circle Tapa Brata, the term Parayong in area. Filled circle Java calls it Tapabroto. Filled circle Balinese chants Upasana. Filled circle Kanyago Tapo, Batagak in Svarnadvipa. Filled circle Kamala in Sulawesi, when doing so is called Akamala. Moksartham Jagaditaya, the happiness of the afterlife. Moksa, the contemplation is tapa, or topo, restraint to reach the spiritual level. Brata, disciplined procedures are done to improve the quality of humanity through the teachings of Dharma, Dhamma. To know God then unite in will. Hyang Widi Tungal. That's the original Dharmak. The tapa procession in Buddhist terms is yoga. One of the books that describes it is Samadhi, in a large group of Buddhist schools included in the Vajrayana school. Let us look at the table of years of the development of the Buddha, specifically the Buddha Vajrayana and the area of its spread. From the table above we can see that the Mahayana Buddhist school developed from 700–1200 AD in mainland India, and the Buddhists who developed in Southeast Asia are Theravada Buddhists who are thought to have started from Sri Lanka from 250 BC 1200 AD. So Vajrayana Buddhism never entered the archipelago. The Theravada faith was also embraced by the Thai Sukhothai ethnic kingdom around 1260. Theravada further strengthened during the Ayutthaya period, 14th to 18th centuries, becoming an integral part of Thai society. In mainland Southeast Asia, Theravada continued to spread to Laos and Cambodia in the 13th century. However, starting in the 14th century, in the coastal extremities and islands of Southeast Asia, the influence of Islam turned out to be stronger, expanding into Malaysia, Indonesia, and most islands to the south of the Philippines. From the above information regarding the spread of Buddha, we can conclude that both Mahayana and Vajrayana Buddhas in their spread, especially in the centuries before 1200 AD, never entered the Indonesian archipelago, Theravada Buddhism which in its spread reached Southeast Asia. In a description of the literature that is circulating about Manjusri in Indonesia are. In 8th century Java during the Medang kingdom, Manjusri was a prominent deity revered by the Sailendra dynasty, considered to have adhered to Mahayana Buddhism. In the Caloric Inscription, 782, and the Manjusrigra Inscription, 792, it is mentioned about the construction of a large inscription named Vajrasana Manjusrigra, Vajra House of Manjusri, is identified today as Siwu Temple, which is located just 800 meters north of Prambanan. Siwu is the second largest Buddhist temple in central Java after Borobudur. This depiction of Manjusri in Sailendra is similar to those of the Nalanda-style Pala dynasty, Bihar. Manjusri is depicted as a young handsome man with his palms tattooed with flowers. His right hand is facing downwards with open palms while his left hand holds the Utpala, blue lotus. He also wore a necklace made of tiger canines. Let us take a closer look at the meaning of Manjusri in the archipelago. The word Manjusri is listed on the Manjusri inscription, Caloric Inscription and Manjusrigra Inscription. Brackets are named asterisk Vajrasana Manjusrigra, Vajra Manjusri's house. In a complete sentence like this, Manjusri was a prominent deity revered by the Sailendra dynasty, considered to have adhered to Mahayana Buddhism. In the Caloric Inscription, 782, and the Manjusrigra Inscription, 792, it is mentioned about the construction of a large inscription named Vajrasana Manjusrigra, Vajra Manjusri's house, identified as Siwu Kandi. Vajrasana Manjusrigra. In the Sanskrit dictionary, Vajra, lightning. Sana, tree there. The full meaning of Vajrasana. It can be interpreted, the flash of tree lightning light that illuminates the tree, or a symbol of the power of light such as the height of the tree there, is not the same as Vajrayana, which is induced by one of the Buddhist views. If associated with Mahayana Buddha, because the words Mahayana and Vajrayana are two Buddhist philosophical views. Manjusrigra. In the Sanskrit dictionary, Gura gra, peak, very, while for the separate word sigra means immediately, for the word house in Sanskrit is griya, house, prasada, temple, building, palace. Complete understanding of Vajrasana Manjusrigra, it would be more correct if it means not a house but a holy place, and the word build is not written because in the previous text in the Kalasan inscription for the name Sailendra there is a time description, which has been running for 700 years. Before we know further about Manjusri, which we will examine from the Manjusri inscription and Manjusrigra inscription, which is more detailed, the author recalls the discussion of this section, namely the discussion of the Caloric inscription. This reminder and explanation will support our understanding later in the discussion on Manjusri. The Caloric inscription is an inscription dated 704 Saka, written in Sanskrit with the Pra-Nagari script, found near the temple barn in Caloric village located not far north of Prambanan, central Java, Indonesia. The writings on the inscription were found in poor condition, with some parts that are unclear and illegible. As a result, historians can only translate the main information of the inscription. The inscription mentions the construction of a sacred building to house the Manjusri statue containing the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha wisdom, Trinity same as Brahma, Vishnu and Maheshvara. The construction of this sacred building was ordered by King Indra, honored in his official name Sri Sangramadhananjaya. Presumption. This reference to Hindu deities in Buddhist temples signifies the Tantrayana, Vajrayana influence of Buddhism. The temple dedicated to Manjusri is identified as Candi Siwu, which is located not far north from the Prambanan temple. Currently the inscription is displayed at the National Museum of Indonesia, Jakarta, with inventory number No. D.44. In the information above that has been spread so far about the interpretation of Prasasti Caloric, there are key words, including Manjusri, Vajrayana, Tantrayana, Sangha, Brahma, Vishnu, Maheshvara, Buddha, Dharma. We will explain. 1. Manjusri. Complete review after completion of the description below. 2. Vajrayana. 3. Tantrayana. 4. Sangha. 5. Dharma. 6. Maheshvara. 7. Brahma. 8. Siwu Temple. The names mentioned above we will detail one by one. Is it true that these words support the claim that the Sailendra dynasty adheres to Mahayana Buddhism? 2. Vajrayana. Buddhists generally classify themselves as Theravada or Mahayana. This classification is also used by some experts and is one of the most common uses in English. Two main extant schools of Buddhism are generally accepted by scholars: Theravada, School of Elders, and Mahayana, Great Vehicle. Vajrayana, a form of teaching associated with the Indian Siddha, Vajrayana can be considered a third school or just part of Mahayana. Theravada has a wide following in Sri Lanka and Southeast Asia. Mahayana, which includes the Pure Land, Zen, Nichiren, Shingon and Tiantai traditions, can be found throughout East Asia. Tibetan Buddhism, which preserves Vajrayana teachings from 8th century India, is practiced in the regions around the Himalayas, Mongolia and Kalmykia. Theravada Buddhism. The Theravada school is considered to have the oldest Buddhist philosophy that has survived to date, and for several centuries dominated Sri Lanka and the Southeast Asian region, parts of southwest China, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, Malaysia, Indonesia and Thailand. And also parts of Vietnam. It is also popular in Singapore and Australia. All Mahayana scriptures were originally in Sanskrit and are known as the Tripitaka. Therefore the term Sanskrit Buddhism is synonymous with Mahayana Buddhism. Sanskrit is the classical language and the oldest language spoken by the educated people of India. Apart from Mahayana Buddhist scriptures, we find many historical and religious records, or other local traditional philosophical texts written in Sanskrit. China is the country with the largest Buddhist population, around 244 million people or 18.2% of the total population. They are mostly followers of Mahayana Buddhism, making Mahayana the largest Buddhist sect compared to other traditions. Mahayana, also widely practiced in East Asia, is followed by more than half of the world's Buddhist population. Vajrayana, Sanskrit, literally meaning vehicle or vehicle diamond, is tantric in the philosophy of Buddhism. According to the Vajrayana scriptures, the term Vajrayana refers to one of the three vehicles or paths to enlightenment, the other two being Sravakayana, also known as Hinayana, and Mahayana. Founded by Indian Mahasiddha, Vajrayana is one of the Buddhist views in Tantra literature. So the conclusion about the word Vajrayana written on the Caloric Inscription or other inscriptions is not correct if the term is considered a support to show that the Sailendra written on the inscription adheres to Mahayana Buddhism, because Vajrayana is a part of Mahayana, and Mahayana Buddhists in the year Sailendra was in power did not reach the archipelago. In the above note, Mahayana Buddhist teachings only developed in India before the 1200 AD century. Mahayana Buddhists who came to the archipelago came from China by Bhiksu It Shing, namely in the 7th to 8th century AD. In the sentences circulating so far, namely, the inscription mentions the construction of a sacred Buddha building for the Manjusri statue house containing the wisdom of Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, Trinity same as Brahma, Vishnu and Maheshvara. It is not quite the word Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha which in Buddhist understanding are different from the so-called Trinity like Brahma, Vishnu and Maheshvara. That is on the Hindu view. Further clarification. On Mahayana, which is considered to underlie Borobudur. Mahayana. In Indonesia. What is the history and spread of it? When and who were the Indian Mahayana missionaries to the archipelago? Buddhism. With his character Siddhartha Gautama 563 to 483 BC, After the Third Buddhist Council, various schools of Buddhism began to appear. Mahayana and Theravada Buddhism. The term Mahayana began to appear in the 1st century AD in northern India. Its development until the 5th century AD. Dominated by Vajrayana until the 8th century in India. What about the archipelago? Look carefully, because this explanation is different from what is currently circulating, published. Bhikkhu Ashin Jinarakita, or the Bonen, also known as Su Kong, was born in Bogor, Indonesia, went to study Dhamma in Theravada-based Burma. He was undergoing Vipassana at the Mahasana Sasana Yekta Meditation Training Center, Rangoon, receiving special guidance from the Venerable U Nyanatara Sayadaw. And on the 17th of January 1955 he returned to Indonesia, bringing joy to Buddhist sympathizers in Indonesia. He saw that his history had been taught under the guidance of teachers from the Mahayana and Theravada schools. Buddhism cannot be divided into different sects. The most important excavation by Indonesian Buddhist scholars at that time was the concept of divinity in Buddhism, which was adopted from various studies of ancient texts in the book Sanghyang Kamahayanikan, the teachings of the Indonesian nation's ancestors, namely the concept of Hyang Widi Tunggal, and above. On this basis the state entered Buddhism into one of the official religions of the state. Meaning, the term Mahayana in Indonesia was only published there after 1955, when Ashin Jinarakita returned to Indonesia and when the state allowed the national Vesak ceremony at Borobudur May 22, 1953. When and who were the pre-Islamic Mahayana missionaries who had been to the Indonesian archipelago before? Facts: in the archipelago in the 4th to 7th centuries AD, Chinese pilgrims who came to the archipelago were to learn and record, not to bring teachings from their country and then spread them to the Indonesian archipelago. Based in the Chinese students' travel notes book, translated and given notes by Korean from the Chinese text by James Legge, Chinese pilgrims who came to the archipelago to learn are Filled Circle Sung Yun 1, 142, 138 B.C. Filled Circle Fa Huan 337, 422 ad. Filled Circle Sung Yun 2, 518, 521 ad. Filled Circle Haiyan Sang 602, 664 ad. Filled Circle Wei Ning 664, 667 ad. Filled Circle It Shing 671, 695 ad. Fa Huan 337, 422 ad. On the way to Javadvipa, Fa Huan saw and noted a building with a statue in it beside a large tree. What he saw was the site or temple, Mendit. Filled Circle in 399 to 414 AD. Fa Huan on a journey in Svarnadvipa saw and recorded, following the river Po Nai, is the river Panay, Kampar, in the place where students make movements, walking in circles, around the tope stupa. Also 4 teachers sitting in 4 corners. In this place the tower has been erected. What this Fawan saw was Pradaksina Prasawiya, Tawaf Dharmic ritual in Muaratakas. Filled Circle Sung Yun 518 to 521 AD learned and recorded the existence of a power which he called Saka Kasatrapas. From the identification of coins it is thought to have existed around 225 AD with the image tope is in the Muaratakas stupa through which equinox, not Sri Lanka. Filled Circle in the year 602 to 664 AD, Haiyan Sang studied and recorded what he saw in Svarnadvipa. There is a stupa built by the king, about 200 feet high. Nearby is a sign where the Tathagata is walking to and fro. What Haiyan Sang saw was the Dharmic ritual Pradaksina Prasawiya. Wei Ning 664 AD 667 AD traveled for 3 years on the island of Java learning and translating a sutra, understanding life after death in this archipelago is called Svarga, not Nirvana. Translation was assisted by a Javanese expert named Jainyanabhadra. Filled Circle I Sing or Yi Jing, years 671-695 ad came to Nusantara 3 times, departed from Guangzhou sailing 20 days, stayed for 10 years in Sriwijaya 685 to 695 AD. He stayed for 6 months in Sriwijaya, 2 months in Malayu for learn science, Sabdavidya, or Sanskrit grammar, Pankavidya, medicine, logic, arts, crafts, and the science of managing the mind. Filled circle Atisa Dipamkara Shranyana, year 1013 AD, he traveled to Srivijaya, stayed for 12 years to study, then returned to India, died 1054 in Naitang, Tibet. Atisa Dipamkara Shranyana offered many jewels and gold. His followers also offered 1 gold coin for each of his students. Guru Dharmakirti Suvarnadvipa. Guru Dharmakirti Suvarnadvipa offered Budarapang to Dipamkara, and he stayed at the Silver Umbrella Palace in Suvarnadvipa for 12 years. While here he slept on the floor, at the foot of his master's bed, as a sign of respect for the pupil to the teacher. So in the archipelago in the 4th to 7th centuries AD, Chinese pilgrims came to learn about the Dharmic original teachings of the archipelago's ancestors, called Dharma Dhamma, not to bring teachings from their country and then spread them across the archipelago. That pre-Islam in the archipelago was not Hindu or Buddhist. The king and his kingdom adhered to the original Dharmic teachings of the archipelago's ancestors, called Dharma Dhamma. This teaching was what was studied in the early days long before 500 BC in Svarnadvipa, depicted in Borobudur and perfectly preserved in Bali, which underlies the birth of 3 teachings in Indian land. To find out, we will discuss one by one, first with a discussion of what it is. Tantrayana. Tantrayana. John Woodruff (1865–1936) was the first Western scholar to seriously study Tantra, who wrote about Tantra under the pen name Arthur Avalon and is known as the founding father of Tantric studies. Unlike previous Western scholars, Woodruff advocated and practiced Tantra, researching and presenting it as an ethical and philosophical system according to the Vedas and Vedanta. Woodruff also practiced Tantra and, while trying to maintain scholastic objectivity, was also a student of Hindu Tantra, the Shiva Shakta tradition. Subsequent developments after Woodruff also noted that a number of scientists began to investigate the teachings of Tantra, including scientists in comparative religion and Indology such as Ajhananda Bharati, Mircea Eliade, Julius Evola, Carl Jung, Giuseppe Tucci, and Heinrich Zimmer. According to Hugh Urban, Zimmer, Evola and Eliade see Tantra as the pinnacle of all Indian thought, the most radical form of spirituality and the heart of ancient Indian indigenous culture, considering it the ideal religion for the modern era. They see Tantra as the most transgressive and holy way. Ellen Goff states, the Jain method of worship was most likely influenced by the idea of Shaktism, and this is evidenced by the Tantric diagram of the Rishi Mandala in which Tirthankaras is depicted. The Tantric tradition in Jainism uses oral mantras or mantras, in practice rituals that are believed to increase merit and facilitate rebirth for the realm. In fact, the original Tantric teachings were from the previous Indonesian archipelago. Arya are the Kaka people of the archipelago, written on the bas-relief of Wana Kaka Fala, Borobudur, with the literary text of the word Mahachakya, nation Kakya, Sakya, Saka, Aryan the Great, called Shaitya by European historians. The Kaka existed far earlier than 78 AD from the time of conquering King Salivahana, India. This 78 AD figure is misinterpreted to calculate the beginning of the Saka year on the inscription. In the early Pra-Srivijaya era, the Kadri was led by the name Kandra Nago. There was a tribe apart from the main Soko. From this the son, Tumenging, had a daughter who was married to a clever named Perpatia, then had a daughter in the family system, matrilineal, named Malay, Muni, Jambik, and the youngest named Pito, or Dwi Pito. During the Adityawarman era, the period after the colonization, Chola, was formed as tribalism. On the male side it was called Dachuik Pata, to become the Kaniago tribe. On the wife's side it was called Badi Kaniago, and her 4 younger sisters became the name of the tribe. 1. Malay becomes Malayu. 2. Muni becomes Munaliang. 3. Pito becomes Pitopang. 4. Watch, fixed. When the union with the holy city and the center of the puja underwent an attack by Kola Mandala led by Kaladewa attacking the Gasab area, Siak and the family of the Puti Inda Jelito family were rescued to Sebayong, Selan, Sigingi by Dadu Sati, now in the form of a sultanate. The people who live are actually the tribe whose initial name was Manda Ialang. Mandala, or the form of government of the people who lost their leadership or the top of their customs, because Manda Ialang was left to become Manda Leong, which is read and spoken sometimes becomes Manda Iliong, Manda Iliong, Manda Ilang. The Kadachuan region, which is the holy city, ruled by Candra Nago, is called Naghori in Nagari, the mother tongue of the international language at that time. Sanskrit, with a center of poetry, Mongtakui, and the center of government on the hill, Katanka, in the area of its territory at a radius of 75 kilometers, which is now called Koto, using numbers, namely filled circle 13 Koto, Kampar, filled circle 5 Koto, filled circle 6 Koto Tapang, filled circle Subayong 12 Koto, filled circle Chalk 9, filled circle base 6 Koto, filled circle Galugu 6 Koto, filled circle Rokan 4 Koto, filled circle Rajo 5 Silo, Andiko 44. There is an area in the Pra-Srivijaya era before 78 AD from the center of the puja in the holy city of the original Dharmic teachings, Mongtakui, which is now published as the site of Muaratakas, if currently driving 77 kilometers or 1.53 hours through the Kwak area. The literacy of the two words, Arya, and Tantra, recorded as one word, which is now called the Aliantan area. The road from the direction of Aliantan to Sulagi Hill still has Goa Garuda and Goa Hanuman, where the Aryans perform contemplation, samadhi, learn Tantra. This is where in the Aliantan area the Aryans with the Tantric learning method make their humans capable of exceeding ordinary people, because a secret science called Tantra was later brought by Atisha students to Tibet to become Tantrayana, Vajrayana school of Buddhism Mahayana. In Aliantan there is a Raja Vatsal, Vanua named Dachuak Suri Maharajadaraja Indo. Local people Aliantan call it briefly, Daduk Majindo. Aliantan is the main northern gate to the holy city, starting from Siak Hulu. Mirror Beach is approximately 100 kilometers to enter the city center of Kadachuan. You have to pass through a road which is now called Timbung Bones. This name was spread because previously there were piles of human bones. The commander-in-chief of the road and gate was named Shanghyang Dachuak Penglimo Buyong Amban, who was known to be ferocious and confiscated his belongings against immigrants with bad intentions who were about to enter the holy city, and had to pass through the road which is now called Pile of Bones. The commander-in-chief of Aliantan in the kingdom, Suri Maharajadaraja Indo, has two figures. 1. Shanghyang Dachuak Penglimo Kampuo, or called the commander of Kampo. 2. Shanghyang Dachuak Penglimo Sikuban, from his father's breed, who was in the center of the Kadri named Shanghyang Dachuak Maharajadaraja Sikuban, and the names of his sons were called Tantra. The literacy of the text, Tantra, comes from the word Tan, which means to describe the supernatural powers of God, or it can be interpreted as the essence, or origin of the teachings, this teaching which later developed in India. When there was a war between the people Khan Arya against the Dravidas of the indigenous people of India, Sadashiva was born, meaning he who is always absorbed in consciousness. Later known as Shiva, the greatest contribution of the Aryans to civilization was the introduction of the concept of Dharma. This is the concept of the ancestral teachings of the archipelago and a collection of question and answer books about secret science, known as Tantra Shastra. The principles of Tantra are found in Nigama, while the practices are in the book Religion. There are 64 books containing Tantrayana. Maha Nirvana Tantra, Kalarnawa Tantra, Bidana Tantra, Yoganardaya Tantra. Ancient books it is lost and partly incomprehensible because it is written in secret writings to keep Tantra confidential to those who are common. Penka Ma, 5 R. Madhya, Mamsa, Matsya, Mudra, and Maithuna. The teaching is more directed towards the concept of Karma Marga, Bhakti Yoga, and Jnana Marga, the practice of Tantrayana, namely, Maka, Kama, and Pansaka, or known as Penka Ma, or Malima, are often misinterpreted as Malimo, the bad one. 1. Madhya, Madhya, middle, which means more to the middle way, not too much or less, not too hard or weak, which is then interpreted to be drunk or unconscious. 2. Mamsa, mam equals me, sa equals prithvi, land, which means more to extinguish lust and desire, turning off all senses, which is then misinterpreted as killing animals, eating meat and drinking blood. 3. Matsya, comfortable, flexible, flowing means more flexibility in movement, feeling empathy and sympathy, not stiff, in samadhi, yoga, called pranayama, which aims to calm the mind and easily meditate, which is then misinterpreted as eating fish. Bloating is poisonous. 4. Mudra, bayu, determination, soul is a deep soul, full of determination, implementation of action and proof, which is then misinterpreted into doing hand movements and dancing until tired. 5. Maithuna, unity, destroying, namely unifying the mind to the cosmic, destroying the mind, sinking into nothingness, achieving freedom of mind, which is then mistaken for mass copulation. Furthermore, Tantrayana influences the teachings of Buddhism, the Mahayana school of thought, which focuses on helping each other among followers in achieving spiritual freedom, namely, Nirvana. In Dharmic original, is called Svarga. The Tantrayana that dissolves in Mahayana is called Vajrayana Tantra, or Mahayana Tantra. The meaning is that tantric teachings originate from the archipelago, not India, Tibet. The secret science, known as Tantrayana, is what Aditya Warman learned to fight against the invaders who had since the 9th century wanted to seize the holy city. Teachings of Brahmanism or original Dharmic with its center of worship, Mongtakui, in the era after Srivijaya could only be controlled by Raja Chola Mandala. Along with the return of a student from Tibet, Atisha Dipamkara Surjanana, to his country brought Tantra to become Tantrayana, Vajrayana school of Mahayana Buddhism. Atisa Dipamkara Shranyana is the original name. Another name for Otish was Dipankorsrigan, a figure of the spread of Mahayana and the second wave of Vajrayana to 11th century Tibet, born from Prabhavati Devi and Srikalian 980 AD. In 1013 AD, Atisha traveled with 125 people sailing across the ocean and storms to an area called Boga, a country which at a certain time, if the sun is directly overhead, produces the effect, without shadow, is an equinox at the site of the Takas estuary, not Palembang, or Sri Lanka. Of the 21 youths who were sent, almost all of them died on the way, and only 2 young men, Rinchen Zongpo and Legshe, had mastered the Sanskrit language. On their return, the 2 youths told the king that it was Atisha who taught in Tibet. Atisa Dipamkara Shranyana lived for 12 years in the archipelago Svarnadvipa, studied with a professor named Sirlingpa Dharmakirti. Or Svarnadvipa Dharmakirti, returned to his country teaching in Tibet for 3 years and died in 1054 in Naitang, Tibet. So, secret science, known as Tantrayana, is part of the concept of Dharma, namely, Dharmic original, the concept of the ancestral teachings of the Indonesian archipelago, which later underlies the birth and development of Hindu, Buddhist and Jaina teachings in India, which until now it is perfectly preserved in Bali and depicted in Borobudur. The past begins in Svarnadvipa. Do not turn it upside down. Our ancestors who colored 3/4 of the earth's face, among them the land of India, this is a fact. Hindu and Buddhist tantric traditions spread rapidly in India and Tibet, and from there to Southeast Asia, East Asia and Central Asia. They significantly influenced many other religious traditions such as Jainism, Sikhism, the Bon Tibetan tradition, Taoism, and the Japanese Shinto tradition. The appearance of the term Tantra in the contextual meaning of the word Tantra is found in the Indian texts of the Rigveda 10.719. It is estimated by scholars to be in the period 1700–1100 BC, Loom, one of the series of philosophical views in India. The earliest definitions and expositions of Tantra came from ancient Panini texts, Patanjali, and literature, a ritual-oriented language-focused Mimamsa understanding of Hindu philosophy. 5th century BC scholar Panini, in his Sutra 1.4.54–55 of the Sanskrit grammar, explains Tantra through the example of Sva Tantra, Sanskrit, which he means independent, or one who himself weaves cloths, weaves, promoter, practitioner. Borobudur True Back History Book. Part 2 to Part 3. Santo Saba works. Created as a discourse to scientists based on academic studies and studies, it is not defaming ethnic races and religions, but in an effort to restore the true history of Indonesia. Indonesian Arya. By Santo Saba. Exploration and research. Complete info. WhatsApp to +62813 2132 9787.